Good evening, and we're going to read tonight from the Gospel of John, chapter 14, starting at verse 1. And this is the Messiah speaking, Yahushua HaMashiach, the Messiah. He said, let not your heart be troubled. You believe in, of course it says in your English translation, God, or in the Hebrew it would be Elohim. He said, believe also in me. In my Father's house are many mansions. If it were not so, I would have told you, I go to prepare a place for you. And if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come again and receive you unto myself, that where I am, there you may be also. Now, I'm reading these verses tonight to you, and I've quoted them many times in my teachings, but I want to go back through and just sort of spend a little time on these verses because this to me, of course, is one of the many verses that prove a pre-tribulation rapture. There's so much deception out there among people who do not believe in the rapture, or don't even and don't believe in a pre-tribulation rapture. And I find that the more that you study this subject and you really dig into it, the more I'm convinced that the Scripture only teaches one rapture time frame, and that has to be before the tribulation begins. And I know a lot of post-tribbers like to take scriptures, and quote, and they really quote them out of context of who's being spoken about. One of their favorite ones is that he that endureth unto the end shall be saved. And of course that was talking about the endures until the tribulation. But that verse is not talking about the church. And when I say church, again, I'm speaking of, i.e., born again Jew and Gentile believers. Now, for the most part, there are a lot of people in the Hebrew roots movement who have this kind of thinking that we're all grafted, Jews and Gentiles are all grafted into the same covenant, and that we're part of Israel. In other words, Gentiles have been grafted into the covenant with Israel, and so they've become one with Israel. And then you have on the other extreme, you have people who believe that the church has replaced Israel, and that there's only the church, and that there's no more promises to be fulfilled to the nation of Israel. Both of these are extreme, and both of them are wrong and incorrect. The truth of the matter is that there's different groups of people that, as I mentioned before, that Yahuwah is dealing with: the nation of Yasharel, or Israel, and the church, and Gentiles or unbelievers. Now, once the church began on the day of Shavuot, again, the Jew and Gentiles, the kingdom was offered to the whole world. And at first it started with the Jews, or the Yahudim, and then because of their national rejection of the Messiah, even though there's been Jews or Yahudim that have received the Messiah, even the disciples were the first believers, and they were Jewish. And most of the church started with 120 Jewish believers in the upper room. And then, of course, it spread out from there to the Gentiles. And so that is really what constitutes the church. Truly born-again Jew and Gentile believers, whether they be Jew or Gentile, they are part of one new man, as Paul wrote about in Ephesians chapter 2. That we all have been made to drink, Jew and Gentile, into one spirit, or one ruach, and that's who is the church. The church was not in existence until Shavuot. Do you remember I shared with you in Matthew chapter 16, the Messiah, Yahushua, declared that he was going to build his church, and then with those words, you knew that the church wasn't in existence then, because I will build is future tense. He said, I will build my church up, and he said, upon this rock. He was talking about this revelation, the revelation of who the Messiah is. If you remember what happened there in those particular verses, the Messiah asked Peter, James, and John, who do men say that I, the Son of Man, am? and they began to quote different people. And then he said, but who do you say that I am? And then Peter said, thou art the Mashiach, the son of the living Elohim. And then the Messiah said, flesh and blood did not reveal this to you, but my Father, which is in heaven. And then he said, and upon this rock, or this revelation is really what he's talking about, this foundation, a rock is a foundation. Upon this foundation, I will build my church, and the gates of hell shall not prevail against it. He was talking about the church itself, the body of the Messiah. We are the body of Messiah. We are also the bride of Messiah. And so that's one of the main reasons that we will not be here for the tribulation, is because we have not been appointed to Yahuwah's wrath, and this time frame is the day of wrath, but we've been appointed unto salvation or deliverance. And so the Messiah in these verses, we're going to get to more of this in our next session, but he made a promise to us that he would come and receive us unto himself. He didn't say, I'm going to come and be with you. And that happens at the second coming, when he actually comes with us, if you read in Revelation chapter 19. It's so easy to prove the pre-tribulation rapture if you just study this out and not take verses out of context to try to prove your point that the rapture is post-trib, or that there is no rapture at all. So I'm sharing these with you to help build your foundation of confidence that you know what you believe, and that you don't think one way or the other, but you know the truth, and the truth that you know has set you free. Thank you for your time, and we'll pick this up on our next session, going back through these verses here. Until then, shalom.